Now, at the time the lawsuit was filed, the NFL had only one black coach, head coach, Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, since then, of the 32 franchise teams, 2 have black head coaches, 1 has a multiracial head coach, and 2 have non-black minority head coaches. Now, this is a league where about 70% of the players are black. We have an all-star panel on the program today to discuss. We want to welcome, joining us in Los Angeles, California. He is there for the Super Bowl, former NFL linebacker, speaker, author, and the CEO of Game Changer Coaching, Rennie Curran. In New York City, we have sports attorney and sports law professor Dan Lust. In Chicago, criminal defense attorney and former assistant state attorney, and Johnny Cochran's mentee, Tamara Walker. And in Atlanta, Georgia, criminal defense attorney and former federal prosecutor, Michael Sterling. Wow, what a panel. We are so delighted to have all of you on the program, lending us your insight and your expertise. I want to begin, Rennie, if I can, with you, please. We know that Brian Flores is alleging racism in the hiring practices of the NFL and some of its teams, and he's calling these interviews shams. In your experience playing in the league, did you ever witness any racial discrimination in any of the hiring practices?
So not necessarily in terms of the hiring practices, right? When you look at how they hire, it's not something where it's going to come out blatantly where they say things like, you know, you're not fit for this because of your skin color. So it's not going to be that racism that's in your face, but there is a bias. It's a clear bias. And I think that's what Brian Flores is trying to point out, that when you look at the numbers, when you look at the makeup of the league, and we're not just talking about coaching positions because it's so easy to look at that, but it's rampant throughout the entire makeup of the league. When you look at, you know, who's behind the GMs, who's making the key decisions, quarterbacks. You can look at the training staff, right? Head trainers, equipment managers. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's a clear problem when it comes to diversity. I think we have to move beyond the point of just trying to check a box, which I think is a lot of what I saw. Like when it came to trying to solve these problems, it was more about checking the box instead of really solving the problem.
Sure. We know that Brian Flores has said we need change, and he is saying that the reason for filing this suit, even though it's very risky career-wise for him, is because he wants to effectuate change. Is that something that realistically is likely to happen? Michael Sterling, I want to go to you on this one, please. What do you think when you hear that this lawsuit is being filed to make a change happen?
I mean, I think that's the only way historically that the NFL has been willing to change, is that they've been forced to do so. They didn't integrate black players in the 40s, reintegrate black players in the 40s because of their goodwill. They did it because the Rams wanted to play in a city-owned stadium, and they wouldn't allow them to play without an integrated team. You know, you look at Colin Kaepernick's lawsuit, things started to change because of his lawsuits. Historically, the only way the NFL has changed is because they've been forced to do so. In the 20 years, Julia, since the Rooney Rule has been passed, there's been over 129 coaching vacancies. Only about 15 of those have been filled by head black coaches. We know for a fact that head black coaches in the NFL, even after a winning season, are 3.5 times more likely to be fired than their white counterparts. Certainly, the only way I believe that things are going to change is if the NFL is forced to. This lip service that they provide regarding diversity being its core is just simply not true. You know, that has not been the case when it comes to positions of leadership at the coaching, at the ownership, and executive level in NFL. So I think that what Brian Flores is doing is admirable, and I think that it's the only way to bring about change is if the NFL is forced to do so.
Michael, thank you. Dan Lust, to you next on this question about the Rooney Rule, please. We know that Brian Flores' attorneys have come out and said that the Rooney Rule just doesn't work. You're a sports attorney. What do you see when you look at the rule and what we've seen taking place with the rule in effect?
Yeah, I think Brian Flores' complaint says that the Rooney Rule was well-intentioned, but at the end of the day, right, numbers never lie. 2003, I don't think we can say that we've as the NFL, as a sport, as fans, that the sport has improved from a diversity standpoint. The numbers are what they are. Mike Tomlin, at the time this lawsuit was filed, was the only head coach in the league, 6 African-American general managers, and maybe the main one here, 0 owners. And I think it all has to come from the top down. So, Julie, you mentioned change. It's kind of interesting, right? In the last week since this lawsuit's been filed, there's been 2 African-American head coaches that have been hired. One by, Brian Flores' former team, the Miami Dolphins, and the other one by the Houston Texans, the team that I think was considered the front runner to sign him as the head coach. So, I think Brian Flores' attorneys are trying to enact change, and I think it's a really, it's a good cause, right? And maybe you could argue that the change, at least some positive momentum has already happened, but certainly a lot of work to be done. And I think maybe, Julie, the interesting question, this lawsuit's filed while there are 5 head coaching vacancies. And I think just from a legal standpoint, you kind of have to ask yourself the strategy behind filing the lawsuit while there are still vacancies, right? Maybe if you're Brian Flores, and I'm sure he had this conversation with his attorneys, should I file the lawsuit before or after these vacancies are filled? Maybe I still want to coach, maybe I don't. I think the counter is that you send certainly a very loud and, an emphatic message that that my lawsuit is maybe more important than my head coaching career. So I think that's an interesting conversation that all lawyers are having, that decision to file really while still interviewing and looking across the table and saying, I'd like this job, while that interviewer is knowing that you're suing the NFL. You're suing all 32 NFL teams, obviously, including the team interviewing you. So, yeah, certainly a fascinating decision, in a lawsuit that I think has already sent ramifications throughout the league. And, we'll see where it goes from here.
Right. Dan, I'm glad you brought that up about the vacancies, because we know Brian Flores is up for 2 head coaching jobs right now with the Saints and with the Texans. And Tamara Walker, I want to go to you on this one, please. Do you think this is helpful or harmful to him as he's wanting to get a new head coaching job with the NFL, having the suit with the league? How do you think it affects things for him, please?
Well, thank you, Julie. So first of all, as the example that Colin Kaepernick has said, he was blackballed after taking his stance. And I think it's very likely that could happen to Brian Flores. But what I think is key to mention here is that sometimes taking a stance and taking a stand is more important than your individual advancement. I think he's made it very clear that he still wants to be a head coach within the league, that coaching on the NFL level is his passion. However, the lawsuit speaks for itself in terms of the statistics of Black players versus Black members of the head coaching portion, members of the NFL itself as a league and as an organization, not to mention the ownership. So I think sometimes, the advancing the cause and taking a stand and really making your morals speak out. He cited Dr. King in making his decision to sue. I think that took precedence over his individual quest to be a head coach.
Tamara, Michael, Rennie, Dan, thank you all so much. I have so many more questions for all of you, and just want to make one correction. Apparently the Texans have made a decision on the head coaching job. They did hire a Black head coach, so just the Saints job could be a possibility at this point, as we understand it, for Brian Flores. We're going to continue our conversation with our special panel on that discrimination lawsuit right after this quick break. Thank you for watching Court TV Live.
If you need life insurance but are worried you won't get approved due to your age or pre-existing conditions, listen up. Plans are available now, and you cannot be turned down due to health.
At my age?
If you are between 45 and 85, your acceptance is guaranteed. No health questions, no medical exam.
No medical exam? For someone my age?
It's true.
Impressive.
Get up to $25,000 in coverage, guaranteed, to help your family pay credit card debt, medical bills, or funeral costs. Your loved ones will thank you for planning ahead.
Practices into the spotlight just ahead of their biggest event of the year, that of course being the Super Bowl. Newsy's Clayton Sandell reports.
Los Angeles hit nearly 90 degrees Wednesday, and NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell was feeling every bit of it.
You've been commissioner for 15 years. Do you not bear some personal responsibility for not having made more progress?
During the commissioner's traditional pre-Super Bowl press conference, the questions barely hit on Sunday's big game, instead focusing on multiple problems plaguing the NFL off the field, starting with a recent lawsuit filed by former Miami Dolphins coach Brian Flores, alleging Black coaches are being chronically ignored for top jobs.
What's getting done to really implement change in that respect?
I think we made a tremendous amount, a lot of progress in a lot of areas, but not at the head coach. And that is something that is something we really have focused on to try to get the kind of results that we would expect. And we fell short of that by a long shot for us.
On the topic of overall diversity in football, Goodell took tough questions, including from his own employees.
When we look at the league office, of the top 11 executives there are only 2 people of color. When we look at NFL Media Group, where I work, there is not one black person at the senior level in the newsroom who makes decisions about a league whose player population is 70% black.
We believe in diversity. We believe in it as a value. We believe it's made it stronger. People who've come into the league who are diverse have been very successful and made us better. And we just have to do a better job.
Goodell was also asked about sexual harassment allegations made by a former employee against Dan Snyder, owner of the recently renamed Washington Commanders.
Dan Snyder and the Washington football team need to be held accountable.
Wednesday, the Commanders announced they would conduct an investigation. Goodell says not so fast.
I do not see any way that a team can do its own investigation of itself. That's something that we would do. We would do it with an outside expert that would be able to help us come to the conclusion of what the facts were and what really truly happened, so that we can make the right decision from there. So we'll treat that seriously.
In his lawsuit, Brian Flores says he was offered money to lose games, presumably so the team could get better draft picks. Goodell says those allegations go to the heart of football's integrity.
They are very serious matters to us on all levels, and we need to make sure we get to the bottom of all of them.
And I'm honored to have with me a sensational panel of very impactful voices on the program today to talk about this case. Still with me, former NFL linebacker Rennie Curran, sports attorney Dan Lust, criminal defense attorney Tamara Walker, and criminal defense attorney Michael Sterling. Rennie, I'd like to go to you first on this one, if I may, please. Learning about this case, one fact that came out through Brian Flores was that he was offered $100,000 from the Dolphins if he would tank games. And it's his contention that because he refused to do that, refused to lose on purpose, that he thinks that's why he was let go. That just, I know, made a lot of people sick to hear that. And I would think someone like yourself who worked so hard, to play, at the top level of the sport would be so sickened by that. Tell us how that makes you feel hearing that, please.
It's extremely disheartening. Appreciate the question and for you having me on. It really, really is. Because like you said, you work extremely, extremely hard. A lot of us, when we get to the league, it's our dream to make it there. We've grown up watching our star players. We have dreams and aspirations of being able to help our families, being able to change our situations. A lot of us are from really, really tough backgrounds. So to hear that goes on behind the scenes, when you already know it's a business, it really is disheartening. And it's sad that that's the case, when it comes to especially coaches of African-American descent that are minorities that already have a tough situation walking into many times a lot of situations where the numbers are against them, right? The stats are against them already. When you look at how many times they get the opportunity to fail, right, to lose, it doesn't look good. They don't really get that much of an opportunity. So to hear things like this happen, it really, once again, drives the case that things have to change. I mean, whether it's a racial rule or just something that they put in place, they have to go beyond just saying diversity is one of our values. And just like I said, checking the box. It has to be actionable steps and they have to be held accountable.
Right, Rennie. And Rennie, is there a message you have for any fans who might have been really disheartened to hear something like that, who love and appreciate players like you, who play your hearts out in the games? What do you say to all the fans who are rooting for you?
Yeah, I would just say to the fans that, regardless of what goes on in the league offices and, with the GMs and the owners, just know that every single player out there is fighting for their families, fighting for their communities. Like, these guys really, really care. I mean, even with the Super Bowl, guys who just ended their seasons who aren't going to be playing in this game, some guys are already training and preparing their bodies for next season. So just know that regardless of what goes on, like a lot of us players, we have no clue that a lot of these things exist. We're just out there trying to make the best. And every single day, every single year, you have to earn your job. So just know that, we want to win just as badly as you do as fans, and we care. This is not just something that we do for fun. This is, this is about family. This is about legacy. This is about so much more than just a game.
Yeah, it really is, Rennie. Thank you. Dan Lust, to you next on this one, please. The NFL made it clear they're going to defend this suit, calling the claims meritless, saying they're without merit, and strong words there. We know this is early on in the litigation, but tell me, when you look at this suit, what do you think? Do you see something that does have merit and does have teeth?
Well, I think the NFL would have that statement back if they could. I think that it was issued maybe within like an hour and a half of the lawsuit being filed. And you guys are talking about there's allegations with respect to Stephen Ross. We'll call it a bribe, $100,000 per game lost. I think the allegation was about the 2019 season. So I'm not sure how the NFL could conduct a full investigation into those bribing allegations within an hour and a half and call that meritless. And really, to the larger conversation, Brian Flores has specific allegations, right, with the NFL's track record for 20 years. So there's certainly some merit to those allegations, right? So I don't think you can say that's without merit. Now, as for the specific claims here, right, we essentially have 4 causes of action for discrimination. I think, I don't know if anyone will disagree, but I don't think the Stephen Ross allegation with respect to a bribe. I think even if you showed me a check and the smoking gun that said Stephen Ross's name for $100,000 in the memo line, it said for Brian Flores to lose. It's not really discrimination, right? It's something, but I don't think it's necessarily relevant to that cause. Really where people are focusing on, at least at this stage, and obviously we're going to see what comes out in discovery, but now what people are really sinking their teeth into, aside from the actual numbers and the statistics of, 1 NFL head coach, 6 NFL general managers, 0 owners, people are looking at that text message, that text exchange. We showed that video earlier between Brian Flores and Bill Belichick. I should mention, full disclosure, I worked for the New York Giants from 2008 to 2012. I have had no involvement in the organization in about 10 years. I will say, and I think any football fan can tell you, or lawyer, right? Bill Belichick is the head coach of the New England Patriots. He does not work for the Giants. He's not legally capable of speaking for the Giants. And if you look at those texts, it says, I'm hearing from Buffalo and the Giants that you're going to get the job. I think they're going to name Brian Daboll. So, I don't know if that's necessarily a smoking gun that I think many thought it was when you first read the complaint. I think it's certainly relevant. You're going to figure out, right? You want to depose Belichick. You're going to depose, all these other people. But I'm not sure as of today that we can say one way or the other definitively Brian Flores' true chance of success here.
Understood. Dan Lust, thank you kindly. Thanks to all of you. You're being so generous with your time. Our panel is going to stay with us. We have more questions for them. Coming up, we're going to talk about what Brian Flores wants out of this suit. This is Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, catch up on the motions argued today in the movie Popcorn Murder trial. What exactly should we expect to hear from both sides in Monday's opening statements? And on the docket, a look ahead to next week's sentencing of former officer Kim Potter in the death of Dante Wright. We'll break down everything you need to know ahead of our live coverage of these proceedings.
Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
At PMD Beauty, we develop spa-quality skincare tools you can use in the comfort of your own.
No obligation Medicare benefits review. Just call 800-279-5106. 800-279-5106.
I just think of all the coaches that, even on my staff. I thought about guys on my staff or my previous staff in Miami who I know are more than capable, who are gifted to coach in this league, to lead. I just want them to have the opportunity to stand in front of an owner and have a real opportunity to get one of those jobs.
Former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores explaining the reasoning behind his lawsuit, claiming that the NFL has discriminated against black coaches in their hiring practices. A very special panel on the program to help me discuss. Former NFL linebacker Rennie Curran is with us. Sports attorney Dan Lust is here as well. And criminal defense attorneys Tamara Walker and Michael Sterling are also on the program. Tamara, I want to begin with you, if I may, please. What we're doing on the program today, I'm seeing happening on many networks and local news programs, discussion about this. You see it online, you see it on blogs, you see it on Twitter. This case is all over the place. You know a lot about publicity with cases. You're no stranger to high-profile cases. How do you think the media interest might affect this case that Brian Flores is bringing?
Interesting question, Julie. So first of all, let me say that, you know, the NFL has always been very motivated by fans. And I think that that is going to be a key component. You have the media coverage, which thus far has been pretty fair and balanced. I've seen Brian Flores' side of the story quite a bit. However, when you have a league which is 70% Black, as has been mentioned in other portions of the segment, you have to deal with the issues head on. And I think that that's been a recurring problem for the NFL throughout its history. Through, as Michael spoke about, the history where Black players were prohibited at a point until they were forced because of public accommodation rules. And then you now still have the problem of management, coaches, and owners, where there was once a problem where Black quarterbacks were not thought to be qualified. So you have a scenario where you have a group of generally white men who are benefiting from the actions of Black players who are, as Rennie said, leaving it all on the field. These gentlemen are tearing apart their lives, their physical health, their families are impacted. All of that, I think, has to be a part of the conversation if you're going to examine this entire issue.
Sure. Well said, Tamara. We know that Brian Flores wants many, many, many things. There are so many things his attorneys laid out in this suit, and we have it all. We're going to put it up on the screen as I have my next question for attorney Michael Sterling. Michael, you are a sensational trial attorney. You have a tremendous reputation in Atlanta where you practice. You know how to try a case. And you also know that cases settle, right? I mean, the system would just collapse if we didn't make agreements. And when you look at this one and you look at the allegations, all of these demands, knowing what the NFL has at stake, what do you think we're likely to see as the outcome of this suit, please, Michael?
Well, if I'm optimistic, you know, my hope is that some of these changes he's asking for, some of these institutional changes. So you've got sort of the Rooney Rule, right, which says you have to interview at least one Black head coach when you have a vacancy, or one Black candidate when you have a vacancy. So I think what Brian Flores is saying is, how do we actually enforce this rule to make it meaningful? Here are some suggestions for what we can do to make sure that Black candidates are actually given an opportunity, particularly in the NFL, where 70% of the players are African American. And I think that's important. That's something we can't just overlook or give lip service to. You're talking about young men in their 20s who come into the league, who need mentorship oftentimes, who want to be able to communicate with the leadership and personnel, and you're excluding people who look like them from that opportunity. I mean, could you imagine, for example, the NHL, which is 93% of individuals players, 93% of them identify as white, if all of the ownership was Black and all of the head coaches were Black and there was only one white head coach in the NHL, people would be raising havoc. They would be saying, oh my God, this is totally unfair. You can't believe this. And so I think people just need to understand that, you know, what Brian Flores is trying to accomplish here is some sense of parity and equity, some sense of fairness in a league where majority of the individuals look like him, and folks should be given a fair shot and a fair opportunity.
Right, Michael. Thank you. I want to go around the horn. We don't have much time left, but I think many people are wondering, what is the NFL going to do next? So I want to get some quick answers from you all. Rennie Curran, let me go to you first. What do you think they do?
I think it was mentioned before, it comes down to the fans. You know, they respond to money. That's one thing I know about the NFL. And if the fans get behind this and they demand that change needs to happen and it affects those owners' pocketbooks, that's what's going to really affect that change.
Dan Lust, what do you think?
I mean, from a legal standpoint, right, they're going to file the 12B6. They're going to move to dismiss, and they're going to try to kick this case to arbitration. And they're going to fight class certification tooth and nail. Any of those, right, could be a really big blow to Brian Flores' case. So as much as Roger Goodell is saying they're going to work on it, the NFL historically, any of these leagues, they move to dismiss very aggressively.
Thank you. Tamara Walker, what do you think they're going to do?
Oh, I agree about the arbitration. Actually, I think that that's a part of what they have to do is go to arbitration first. It's going to be very interesting how Flores' claim survives that. But to Rennie's point, to the larger social justice issues here, I think that this is critically important. And I think that the NFL needs to think long and hard about their approach in a dismissal action.
And Michael Sterling, last word from you, please.
Yeah, I agree with Rennie. The NFL responds to their bottom line. With the public outcry and the continued media pressure, I think that NFL will have to do something to satisfy those detractors.
Michael Sterling, Tamara Walker, Dan Lust, Rennie Curran, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful Super Bowl weekend. This is Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice.